Welcome to Man Up and Live with Christopher Flagg. Join Christopher every Saturday as he shares a message to encourage all you men in your character, passion, and integrity. Here is today's message.
Good morning. Thank you so much for tuning in again. I'm so glad you're with us as we've just been kind of in this series about no more excuses. We've been really talking to men, really about having no more excuses. We've looked at Joseph, and now we've been in the life of Moses, and we've been talking about no more just feeling worthless. And we started out looking at Moses, how he was trying to do things his own way, and go back, listen to that podcast, that last podcast, and take that in, because God wants to do something so amazing in us men, because once the excuses drop, we can really move into where God wants us to be. And you know, I don't want you to think all of this is just easy or just automatic. As you know, as we saw in that last podcast, God never asked us to pretend as if the past never happened. I mean, Moses had a new view of God's presence and God's plan, and that was great, but he wasn't so sure about God's person. The lingering effects of what happened to Moses when he tried to act as deliverer now began to surface. I mean, his first question, who am I? That should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt. He said this in Exodus 3:11. I mean, this can't be my boy Moses talking, can it? This can't be the man who was mighty in words and deeds, educated, self-confident, walking around saying, I'm not going to let any Egyptians mess with my Hebrew brother. Here, I mean, he's my homeboy. He's from the hood. If you jump on him, you've got to jump on both of us. I mean, now he's saying fearfully, who am I? A rejection will kill your cocky self-confidence. What we need is a settled God confidence. Moses was rattled by his rejection at the hands of the Hebrews. I mean, he had been a slowly shepherd herder for like 40 years. He had the lost confidence that God could use them. He was operating from a feeling of inferiority. So God answered in Exodus 3:12 saying, I will be with you. God knew Moses had been humbled and pressed down, but the question was no longer who Moses was, but who God is. But Moses had another objection. Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? Remember what we read in Acts? Moses had a definite way with words. This guy never had a problem with coming up with an answer. But now he was saying, I don't know what to say. I just can't say a voice from a bush told me to come down here. What will I say when the people question me? I love Exodus 3:14. God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you're going to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. I is a personal pronoun. Am is the present tense. You know, this eternal God who always lives in the present tense is the one who sent Moses. That's the name of God Moses needed to know, and so do we. God always lives in the present. He does not have a past or a future. You and I have a past, and we also have a future, but everything is present tense to God. Therefore, if He tells you about your tomorrow, He is not waiting to see if it's coming true. It has already come true for God. Everything is present. So God was telling Moses, you can go to Egypt and set my people free because everything I am telling you is in my today. Then in the remaining verses of the 3rd chapter of Exodus, God proceeded to tell Moses exactly what would happen when he went to Pharaoh. It was as if God has done in God's sight. But Moses said, I was rejected. God says, but I am. Moses said, I tried this once and it didn't work. God says, but I am. If they ask you who sent me, tell them I am sent you. Moses wasn't quite finished yet, however. I mean, he was still acting like a rejected, defeated failure. What if they do not believe me or listen to me? This time God answered with a question. What is that in your hand? We saw that in Exodus 4:2. Moses was holding his staff, the shepherd's crook. God told him to throw it on the ground, and when he did, it became a snake. Moses jumped back in fear, but then God told him to pick it up by its tail. Moses said, "What?" God said, "Pick it up by his tail." So Moses reached out and grabbed the snake, and it became a staff in his hand again. God then gave Moses a second sign in verses 6 and 7, the changing of his hand from a normal to a leprous, then back to normal again. Moses was just about out of objections, but he had one more save for emergency. "O Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue," in Exodus 4:10. That's what rejection will do to you. It will make you lose sight of who you really are and what you really have. Have you ever seen kids who have been beaten down by parents or school teachers? They are told you are nothing and you're never going to be anything. They walk around saying, "I'm nothing." It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The rejection sinks in and they don't see their capacity and their potential. Moses had been beaten down so low, he said, "I can't talk. How can I go before Pharaoh?" But he was raised in Pharaoh's house. He had just gotten a little rusty. God took care of that objection in the promise of verse 12. "Now go, I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say." What can we learn from Moses about dealing with yesterday's rejection instead of using it as an excuse for today? Let me share 4 principles with you. The first one is our greatest need is not self-confidence, but God-confidence. I've already referred briefly to this. Men are taught to be self-confident. We are taught to say, "I can do it." Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with a healthy sense of confidence in the gifts and abilities God has given you, but what most of us need is more confidence in God who gives us the gifts and the abilities. Second thing is, God uses even the bad experience to prepare us for future service. The things that God allows to go wrong in your yesterday are things He wants to use to make you better in your tomorrows. Often the tragedy is not just that we go through these kinds of experiences. The tragedy is that we often go through them without learning from them, realizing that God can make everything or something good out of each one of them. The third thing is God wants us to do something with what we already have before He gives us something new. Some people say, "God, what are you going to do for me tomorrow?" God says, as He said to Moses, "What is in your hand today? Let me do something with what I've already given you, and then I can show you great and mighty things." The fourth thing is, obeying God leads to a new self-image. No matter how much you're rejected by your father, your mother, or anyone else, if you will follow God in obedience, He can make up all of the loss and then some. We have a great example in Moses. Turn and look ahead at Exodus 11:3. This is after Moses had gone to Egypt and had presented God's plan to Pharaoh. Just before Moses announced the 10th and final plague on Egypt, this verse says, "Moses himself was highly regarded in Egypt by Pharaoh's official and by the people." This is what you call reversal of fortunes. Moses got back all the esteem he had lost, but this time he got it from God. Then in Exodus chapter 14, the Israelites have left Egypt and are caught between a rock and a hard place. Pharaoh was coming with his army to attack them. Their backs are at the Red Sea. There was no escape. So in verses 11 and 12, the people turned against Moses, accusing him of bringing them into the wilderness to die like the dogs. Here is the rejection syndrome again. The people are turning on him again, but listen to Moses this time. "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again." In Exodus 14 and 13. Moses had become a true deliverer now. This guy stood out and stood there. He's doing it in God's time and God's way. And God tells him, "Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground." You probably know what happened. The Red Sea opened up, Israel passed through, then it closed, Pharaoh and his army drowned. Notice how the story culminates in Exodus 14:31. And when the Israelites saw the great power the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant. I have to give you just one more example. In Exodus chapter 17, we find a famous account in which Joshua was to fight against the Amalekites while Moses went up on the mountain to hold up his arms. With a little help from his friends Aaron and Hur, in verse 9, Moses called his staff the staff of God. Back in Exodus 3:2, it was Moses' staff. Now it was the staff of God. The same stick, but different power. Whatever is in your hand today, throw it down. Let God touch it and pick it back up. Then you will be able to do something great for it with God's glory. No matter who told you anything different, no matter who spoke to you into the past, no matter who you felt rejected by, no matter who threw you away as garbage, God wants to use you today. God is the God of the present moment, and he wants to use what you have as long as you'll just throw it down and allow him to touch it so you can pick it up and use it for his glory. So today I just pray, I was going to keep it short today. I just pray that the Lord would bless you. I pray that you would take this in as we continue to look at no more excuses and no more feeling worthless, that we have been bought for a price, that everything that you see inside other individuals, esteem them as you would esteem the Lord because they are created by this amazing God. So today, wake up and live empowered, blessed, and loved, and walk in the character, passion, and integrity of every man should. Because guess what, guys? We're going to step out of the excuses and we're going to walk as Jesus has called us and purposed us to walk. So God bless. We'll see you again next time.
Thanks for listening today. Check back each week for a new episode. Listen to all messages at www.manupandlive.podbean.com. Also listen on Wednesdays for the Midweek Manwich.